Hello everyone, welcome back to the Highland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. Got another special plant spotlight for you guys. This is a very special plant that I have because it's routinely been one of the largest and most reliably picturing plants in the greenhouse. A species that is relatively easy to get a hold of in cultivation, but for some reason I don't see people showing it off very often. A lot of cool hybrids that feature it, but oftentimes the species itself seems to be kind of overlooked for some reason, despite being a fairly easy to grow Highlander as well, a lot more tolerant of warm conditions than a lot of other species of Highlanders that people might be interested in. That is Nepenthes boschiana. And you can see right here we have an upper and a lower picture for you to share with you guys, because this is a very large plant right now. You can see behind me here the vine that has actually produced a flower not too long ago. You can see all the pods were just harvested actually yesterday, as of the time of filming this. It produced a handful of seeds, although not as many as I was hoping for. It does need a repot and a soil refresh, which is probably one reason. But this is a species that is kind of unique in terms of the Borneo tropical pitcher plant species, because it's not located in a place where a lot of other familiar species are. This guy is actually found in southern Borneo, southern Kalimantan. It is currently known from two mountaintops down there, where it grows between roughly 12 and 1,800 meters in elevation, so about 4,500 to almost 7,000 feet or so in elevation. A true highland species, but yet still a lot more tolerant of warmer conditions than most. It is a terrestrial grower, tends to grow on limestone ridges and rocky outcrops. It also likes to grow in relatively stunted forest openings and such. And so because of its terrestrial habits, it is slightly more tolerant of maybe a denser soil mix than some of the other Highlanders that many people might be familiar with. But also, it is quite a large plant. Again, this is a fairly big plant for cultivation. The vine is somewhere around 5 feet or so in length, but in the wild they can get so much bigger. The full length of these vines can sometimes reach more than 25 feet in length, and the vine itself can actually become more than a half-inch in diameter, which is fairly large for Nepenthes. They produce pretty distinctive leaves. They have very decurrent petioles that run down and they clasp around the stem, and that clasping actually runs down quite a ways in between the internodes here. And then a very distinct closed petiole before coming out to this big, broad, ovular leaf lamina. And these can be quite large leaves. This is a basil that has only just started to grow out, and you can see the size of that leaf already compared to the size of my head. It's already over 10 inches long, and the entire leaf can sometimes grow to almost 2 feet in length. So a full-size plant can sometimes be almost 4 feet across. Very large, very impressive. And then, of course, off of that leaf are really long tendrils oftentimes that lead down to the lower pitchers. We'll see if I can turn this around to show you the best of the lower pitchers it's got right now, but I will also show a close-up. So this is the best one right now that it's got. It is a bit of a variable species. We'll talk about in the color for a second, but very distinctive in that roughly the lower quarter to a fifth of the pitcher, so just down at the bottom, is this very expanded, bulbous, inflated ovular section that then runs up to a very narrow, distinctive hip area. And up above that, it is either cylindrical or slightly funnel-shaped up to the mouth. It does have a pair of very large and distinctive wings that run up the front, pretty wide and very distinctively fringed down the front, and then up to a kind of curving, tall, teardrop-shaped mouth, around which is a pretty large and impressive peristome. Now that peristome, it is widest just kind of in the back of the pitcher, up the neck, just below the lid. It narrows down near the front and sometimes actually curves up in a little point, slightly crenellated around the outside, but otherwise it actually stays pretty out, open, and flared. And then, of course, runs up to a broad, cordate or almost heart-shaped or circular lid. Now, the coloration of this species does vary a little bit. The background coloration may be anything from kind of a bright yellowish green to this deep kind of maroon, rusty red purple coloration. And over top of that is usually modeled a deeper, anywhere from deep red to purple black modeling and striping. The peristome, similarly, is also often very, very dark. Sometimes it's red and black striped. Other times it just ages out to this rich, dark purple black overall cherry coloration. Interior usually offsets that, being very creamy white with little purple spots. Now, these lower pictures can become quite large. The one I'm holding here is still a relatively young basil, and it's already at about 7 inches tall, but they can get to almost a foot in height. So quite a large plant. So when it's fully grown, it is a very, very impressive plant. Now, when you switch from that to the vining habit of the plant, you do, of course, switch to the upper pitchers. Now, that long clasping internode stays on the vines. It just kind of gets longer. It actually makes the internodes on the vine look almost like they're winged. But then you get to the upper pitchers, which are also kind of variable. Some of them actually end up being colored like the lower pitchers, but for the most part, they tend to be a lot paler. So they become a lot taller and more slender. Upper pitchers actually can often get bigger than the lower pitchers. So they're not as colorful necessarily, but they are larger. So sometimes up to around 16, 17 inches tall in some cases. They become much more slender. The base, again, it's usually like the bottom 5th to 6th of the upper pitchers, so even less. That tends to be slightly more inflated. It's usually a lot more slender there, less distinct narrowing right near the hip. Sometimes that bulbous section is basically invisible and the entire thing just tapers from bottom all the way up. If it does have a hip, again, like in lower pitchers, it becomes this slender, cylindrical to usually more funnel-shaped upper portion. And it lacks the wings completely. The wings are basically reduced to these barely visible ribs that run right down the front. And then the peristome tends to be a little thinner than in the lowers, but it still retains that kind of broad, slightly rounded, crenellated edges, slightly more flared near the back just below the lid. And then again, coloration is usually paler. They can be darker like the lower pitchers, but usually you end up seeing them being anywhere from plain green or creamy yellow-white to pale greenish cream striped with pale red blotches just like this guy. And then, of course, the peristome similarly can be this very pale kind of creamy coloration overall, or blush to kind of red, maybe some dark red stripes in there as well. So larger but less colorful, you could say, than the lower pitchers are. Now, like all Nepenthes, of course, they are dioecious plants, so once they're fully mature, they will start producing their flower stalks. It can be quite large on this species too, sometimes over 3 feet in length from where it starts on the vine to where it ends, and can have several dozen flowers on there. Now, you have to have a male and a female plant blooming at the same time in order for them to produce species seeds. In cultivation, that's a little easier. You can store pollen and such, wait for another female to show up. Or, of course, we love creating hybrids, so when that opportunity comes in, we cross them with whatever else they can manage to cross with. Now, this is a species that I consider to be one of the easier Highlanders to actually grow, as long as you have the space for that big a plant. Again, with their terrestrial habit, they tend to tolerate pretty well your standard Nepenthes soil mix, so 1-to-1 long fiber sphagnum and perlite, or 1-to-1-to-1 as I do, sphagnum, perlite, and cocoa or orchid bark chips. And you want to keep that just moist. Don't ever let it get soaking wet. Just keep it on the moist side. And you want to make sure it has relatively good aeration. Now, you can vary this soil mix, of course, depending on what your particular conditions are. If you have a wetter, more humid environment, then you may want more airy soil, a lot more perlite or cocoa chips or pumice chunks in there to loosen it up and provide more air in the soil, because it will dry out a lot slower. If you live in a more dry environment, you may want to up the sphagnum amount instead, make it a little denser, and it holds a lot more moisture. These guys tend to prefer, of course, like most Nepenthes, very bright light. Again, they live on ridge tops and kind of open forest areas, so they will be exposed to full equatorial sun in some cases. In the cultivation, of course, maybe full sun is usually not possible because a lot of us live in more temperate areas, and putting them outside there, you may get major humidity and temperature fluctuations that are not good. So if you're indoors, the brightest, sunniest window that you can provide that provides at least several hours of sunlight, or the strongest artificial lights that you can provide for several hours in the day. The brighter the lights, the better. And if the plant is happy, it will tell you, because you will see red flushing along the petioles and down the midrib. Some of the newer leaves may actually have slight red blushing like this one does. That tends to fade as it ages, but it will sometimes stick around, especially on the undersides of the leaves. It might be a little bit striated along the veins. So a little bit of red blushing is a good sign that you're giving it enough light. They are fairly tolerant of a wide range of temperatures. 1,200 meters, roughly 4,500, 5,000 feet elevation, is kind of on the warm highland side. So during the daytime, they want temperatures that are around maybe between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And then at night, dropping down to a maximum of 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Down to true highland conditions, they will also tolerate with temperatures down into the low 50s Fahrenheit. You do need that temperature drop in order to keep them happy long term. If you try and give them warm lowland conditions or very little temperature drop, you may see them persist even for a year or two, but they won't grow as strongly and happily, and you will eventually see the plant start to shrink and decline, or it becomes more susceptible to rot. So make sure you give them those warmer those cooler nighttime conditions with the warm days. Now again, if you have to give them a couple of warm months during the year, like oftentimes I have to because it does get very warm here in summer, then they will tolerate that fairly well and you won't see them slow down much. As long as once winter comes along, you give them slightly cooler conditions to kind of balance out. Now, this species is relatively easy to propagate as well, like most Nepenthes are. You can simply take stem cuttings or basal cuttings when the new basal shoots form, stick that in moist moss, and simply wait. It usually takes a couple of months. The base of that cutting will start to branch out new roots, and once that happens, once a new growth point activates, it's ready to move on. But for just growing the plant on as its own, you want to make sure it has a relatively large pot, gallon size or bigger, because it is a terrestrial highland species, so it does have a relatively large root system, and you want to make sure to accommodate that to keep the plant happiest. Unlike what most people might say with carnivorous plants having small root systems and not being very bothered by getting root bound, in the case of species like this, which are fairly large, bigger often is better. So if you can provide it the space, give it the space. And then, of course, you're going to want a relatively large growing space for once it does get mature. This is not something that is going to fit in a terrarium much longer than maybe the first year or two of its lifespan. After that, it will get huge very quickly. Most of this vine that you see here was developed within about 5-6 months, because down here is actually the remnants of the last flower stalk it tried to produce, and that was back in like September, and that one kind of didn't work out too well. It then produced all of this extra next growth before producing its next flower stalk about 3.5 months ago. So it can grow quite quickly. You may get all of that length in just a couple of months. Might get 2 or 3 leaves every single month with a happy plant, especially in the slightly warmer conditions. So make sure you can provide for that. But if you have the space, of course, and you can provide the right conditions, again, moderate humidity, these guys are fairly tolerant of a wide range, and nice bright light, it is a pretty rewarding species to grow, and one of the easiest to actually get up to one of those really impressive picture sizes that people like to show off. Now, you will expect this species is probably going to be moderately priced in cultivation, and most of the plants, luckily, you will find will probably be captive produced. So on average, a seedling size up to maybe 5 or 6 inch plant might go for around $30 to $45. Larger rooted cuttings and such, like what I may produce off of these plants, might go for $60-65 a piece, especially if it is one of the really flashy, deep pictured plants like this one. So expect it's not the most expensive plant, but it's also not going to be a really cheap plant either. Now, luckily, this is again a species that we don't really have to worry about the origins of the plant, because most of them are going to be produced in cultivation. There are seed-grown plants because there are male and female clones out there, so those are produced fairly regularly. Most of the major nurseries, Borneo Exotics, Exotica plants, have clones of these that they will sell on occasion, so they're fairly available. In the wild, I would say that this is one of those species that might be on the edge of needing a lot of conservation notice. Because again, right now we only know it exists on 2 mountaintops in southern Borneo. Mount Bazaar and then one other nearby a mountaintop that unfortunately I have forgotten the name of. But it could be more widespread because a lot of that area in Borneo hasn't really been surveyed very well, unlike the northern portions. It's less populated, a lot more mountainous, kind of low mountains, but a lot of smaller mountain ranges, not a lot of road access in there, so a lot less explored, a lot less known. So this could be a widespread species, but in the places where it is known right now, there is some poaching pressure, as there is with pretty much every Nepenthes species, but also a lot of danger from habitat clearing. There are some protected areas that this species lives in, but a lot of their habitat might also be under threat from palm plantations, slash and burn agriculture, and other practices that are not so great for the rainforest. So for preserving these plants in the wild, you may want to look at some of the on-ground conservation organizations that are looking to protect large swaths of habitat. That's probably the best way to help these guys. In cultivation, though, luckily, we don't have to worry too much about where the plants are coming from or whether or not we need to retain them for like reintroduction or anything, because they're fairly genetically diverse and a lot of different places have them. Major like conservation programs already do grow these species or have easy access to them. So one that we don't have to worry too much about, unlike some of the other species like Edwardsiana or rigidifolia and such. Now that is about all that I have for this species. Certainly if there's anything that I've missed or if you have questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below the video here. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, share with other people who might want to learn about this species. If you would like to learn more, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything coming up. Turn on the all subscriptions, all notifications button so you don't miss anything. I'm always posting photos and video tidbits on my social media channels at Carlton Carnivores. You can also visit my website, carltoncarnivores.com, where the blog and database are with more informational stuff. And also it's a place where you can help support in a more financial manner, because raising these plants is expensive. Taking the time to edit these videos and make sure they're good for you guys also takes a lot of time and therefore money. So you can buy some of the plants or merchandise that are available at my website shop. Or you can become a Patreon member. You can donate there and get early access to the videos, access to the monthly seed contests that I do. Sometimes I give Nepenthes seeds, butterwort seeds, sundews, things that maybe I don't have in the shop or are very expensive there, and you can get for a lot less, simply the cost of the cheaper memberships, which do start at around $3. If you don't want to do a monthly membership, you can also sign up at Coffee, where you can do simply a one-time donation for as little as a cup of coffee, $3 or $4. Every little bit really does help. You can also simply contact for other ways, for like direct payments via PayPal or such, but most of the links for these things will be in the video description below. Until next time though, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.